everybody, Rob Nelson here to talk about 360-degree filmmaking or virtual reality filmmaking. What is it? How do you do it? In particular, this video is for creators who are trying to get into this, have no idea what's going on. I'm going to walk you through the entire workflow, and it's going to be awesome. The new Oculus Rift and some of these other headphones. Probably going to want something like this, but just to kind of dabble in this 360-degree video filmmaking thing, some of those cameras might work for you. But specifically what I'll be talking about today is this very simple GoPro rig. So we have 6 GoPros together. Each of them go for what, like $429, and you have a $500 rig that holds them. It's really just a little bit of plastic. I don't know why it costs $500, but you know, we're new at all this, so that's what it costs. Oh, so this is the 360 Heroes rig. The Freedom 360 rig is something that a lot of people also use. I quite like this one because you don't need a screwdriver, so I can pop my GoPros in and out. Just gotta be careful not to scratch anything. You can take this and you can mount it to a little tripod or a monopod and start filmmaking with it. Okay, let's talk about shooting. Now the way this works is you're gonna have all your GoPros labeled 1 through 6, and then you're gonna turn them on in order.
So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 here.
Now another thing to keep in mind of when you're shooting with these GoPros, you want them all to have the exact same setting. Common sense, right? These are the settings they recommend right here. Essentially, you want to make sure that you're shooting in the square setting. So 1440 is the setting on here. Also, the reason that you shoot in 60 frames per second is that 1, that helps you sync it a little bit better. And 2, if you're going to be watching it with high quality headsets on later, 60 frames per second actually is closer to what the human eye perceives as opposed to say 25 or 30 frames per second or 24 frames per second, whatever you're shooting at. Now once you've got them all on and running, the first thing that you need to do is make sure that you essentially clap or slate all of your cameras. Now because they're shooting in all different directions, you need to do a loud clap.
Take 1, spherical.
Or what you do is you take your entire rig, say it's on a tripod, and you spin it back and forth. Okay, and we'll get to why that's important later, but it's basically a trigger for your editing system to allow it to stitch them all together properly. And once you've shot whatever it is that you want to shoot, then you're going to come back into the studio and you're going to take all the cards out. Now here's the important bit. As you're ingesting, you need to keep track of which camera is which. Say you have now these 6 cards laid out, card 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. You're going to import them into your computer and then you just label them GoPro 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. So put the raw files someplace and then make a copy of that and bring it onto your drive that you're going to work with. Now let's talk about editing programs. Now there are a couple different ones out there, but by far the most commonly used is one called Pano Video. And they actually are now owned by GoPro, so it works really well when you're taking GoPro footage and ingesting it and then stitching it together. It does that whole workflow for you. And you're talking about a $750 program or so, so that's one extra cost. Now I've found in the past when I talk about editing programs and stuff, it's best to just walk you through in real time through an editing program. And so that's what I'm going to do right now. So this is the program. I'm just going to open it up. And it just says drag and drop the videos here. So I'm going to go over to my Finder and show you what we got here. So these are my RAWs from all 6 GoPros. I shot 3 different test sequences. So what I need to do is I need to go through and I need to get just the first file. That was my first test file. I'm going to select them all and I'm going to copy them. So I hit Apple C and then I go into my test folder. Remember, I keep the RAW folders separate and I never touch them. And then I just select them and drag them into Audio Video Pro. Okay, and it looks like this. You can see all of the videos across the top. Now what I do, first of all, is I go to the Synchro tab, and I'll pull this down so you can see it. These are all my GoPros, GoPro 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Now the problem is that each one is starting at the beginning, but they're not synced yet, and it took me a second to turn them all on, so essentially I have to find the spot where I started spinning this and sync it up. So you can either sync with audio or you can sync with motion. Now what I like to do is I like to sync with motion, and what I'm changing here is I'm saying within a 45-second range, search the GoPros, figure out when I started spinning that thing, and then look for the synchronization. So I just say use motion to synchronize and I let the computer figure it out. Alright, so in this case it says accurate synchronization found, so I just hit apply. Occasionally it doesn't have an accurate sync, so what you'll have to do is increase the range or adjust things slightly and try to redo it again. But a lot of times if you use motion synchronization right at the very beginning, it's pretty easy and it syncs it all up. Okay, so it's applied that. Now what I'll do is I need to stitch them all together. So I go to my stitch tab, and in this case I'm using GoPros, so I click GoPro, and then I'm also saying do it from the current selection. Now this is your current selection. I shot a 5-minute test video, but I really only need it, I actually moved it to a different location partway through, so I'm just going to like shift it to say halfway through. That's my current selection, and I want it to do 5 different positions trying to stitch it, so I'll just say stitch, and it creates an image that looks like this. Okay, let's decrease these images so we can look at it. Alright, and what you can see is it's all funky dunky. You can't even figure out what it's looking at. And you can see Haley's at one part of the view and I'm in the other. I'm actually where I think the straight is supposed to be. So I'm going to drag me to the middle. See, I pull down here, pull up here. We just want to keep the horizon line straight. So I'm going to pull the horizon up everywhere it needs to go. Alright, so there's me right in the middle. That's kind of what I wanted it to do. And now I have to click apply. And now what I can see is as I scroll around in this video back and forth, I stay exactly where I'm supposed to be, right in the middle. And then Haley is actually behind the camera. So in the 360-degree video, if you look behind you, you'll see Haley. Now the one thing that you'll notice is behind me, the sun is right up here. So whichever GoPro was pointed in this direction, it's fairly dark. We've got to adjust that because it doesn't look quite right. So what you do now is you go to the color tab, and they recommend either using just the auto exposure and vignetting adjustment or exposure, vignetting, and color. And I'm just going to click all 3 of those because it works fairly well. And what you can see is from the auto setting, it automatically fixed it. And more or less, it looks really good. I don't think I need to do much to it at this point. Now I can basically render it out, or you can look and you can see there are different projections. If you wanted to say show this in just a normal, HD video, then watch this. Instead of spherical, which is what I have right now, you can do what's called little planet, for instance. But that's our little planet view, which I quite like. But we're not going to do that. In fact, we're just going to export it like this. So the next thing that you do is you hit render. Now, if you were walking around with the video, you would use this stabilization tab. And then the other thing that you would want to do maybe in the future is kind of look at your stitching. Now, let me just show you, before I export it, how some of that works. If you hit the edit button, it brings up your stitching software, which is Autopano Giga. You don't necessarily have to use this, but it's kind of a nice feature. But check this out, if I hit this button, I can see all of the different cameras. So the one that's shooting right at me is actually, more or less I get in one camera. But say over here when I get to Haley and Leo, these two are needing to be stitched together. And so you can see a stitching line right there. And that's one thing that you'll have to adjust later. And that's where a lot of the difficulty takes place in making these virtual reality or 360-degree videos, is making sure that the lines in between the cameras are kind of perfectly stitched so that there's no parallax. And we can get into that in another video. In fact, my friends over at Drift Digital who do stuff like this told me that they would do a behind-the-scenes video from one of their new shoots where they're in New Zealand, kind of talking about different things that you need to think about when you're doing 360-degree videos. Okay, moving on. Let's save this and render it. I go up and I click render. Now, what it's showing you here is that the maximum size allowed by this whole GoPro rig is huge. 5,600 something by 2,800 pixels. But what I'm going to do is you're going to export as an MPEG-4 file, and then you can choose different ones here. I just keep it at auto, which is ultra high def TV. It's basically going to export as a 4K image, roughly. This shows you the pixel count that it's exporting as. It's exporting at 25 frames per second. Now, I'm just going to leave it like that for now, although at higher frame rates, say 60 frames per second, it's going to probably play better on, say, an Oculus Rift. The one thing that I do need to change, though, is the audio source. I was looking right at GoPro 3, so I'm going to click GoPro 3. Use GoPro 3 as my audio as it's exporting. So all I do is I now say render, and it renders out the video. Alright, so let's check out and see what this video actually looks like. This is what it looks like exported.
Okay.
You can see me talking, and I've got Haley and Leo there right next to me. Now when they walk behind me, I had them walk behind me, it looks weird in a video like this, and more or less I would say it looks fantastic. The things to think about is you have to stand about 3 feet away from this GoPro. If you stand closer than about 3 feet away, then you get a weird parallax effect, and the stitching is just terrible. See, like, check out this image right here. You see where I put my hand up close to the GoPro, it just chopped off my fingers. I could obviously fix that in the stitching software, but I'm not going to right at the moment. And I actually picked up the camera and walked around with it, and that's what it looks like, you know, right here. It looks kind of ridiculous when you're watching this in this weird pulled map projection style thing. Essentially, like at the poles, you know, it's all stretched up here where the trees are and down where the ground is. But when you're watching it in 360 or virtual reality, it looks fantastic. All right, so you have this file. Now what do you do with it? Well, very simply, you can pull it into your editing program, edit it up, and export it. Let me just show you that real fast so you understand what's going on. So here's the video I brought in, and I just took it into 3 different segments. This is when I was standing in the middle of the yard. This is where I was walking around with it, talking to my friends. And then this is where I was standing right next to August's little playhouse. Okay, so I have 3 different ones, and I just want to kind of edit them up together. So all I do is I say File, Share, Master File, and then I'm going to export it as an H.264 file. Say Next. I'm just going to export it as my 360 intro as rendered. Now here's the file. All I have to do is change the ending to .mp4. Let's just change it real quick. Okay, because it has .mov on it. MP4. Now I say yes, let's use MPEG-4. Now I don't know why you have to do that, but it's the only thing that kind of works in my workflow. Now this particular file now has no metadata attached to it because it came from our editing program. All of these other files have a little bit of metadata mixed into them. So what you have to do, if you want to say export it now to YouTube, you have to add metadata back. So there is a workflow. I'm going to put the link in the description that YouTube recommends. Essentially what you're going to do is you're going to download this little app. It's a 360 metadata tool. So I'm just going to say open the video, and I'm just going to navigate to my rendered Final Cut Pro video. I'm going to open that. It says there's no metadata found, which makes sense. I got to add it. So I'm going to make it a spherical projection, and then I'm going to say save as. I'm just going to save it as the exact same thing, except I'm going to say dash injected so that I know I injected metadata into it. So I'll save that. There's my new file. Now I can take this and I can upload it to YouTube. So let me just show you that, and I'll put the link right here in the description. So this is how it looks on your computer. You can take this image now and watch this. I can just scroll it around to Jonas. I can scroll it around to Trenton and Phil, the GoPro guys. This is in our backyard, and we just did a little tour. Now the cooler way to watch it though is if you get on your phone and you bring up the YouTube app, then when you click on that 360 degree video, watch this. You know, as you're moving around, I don't know if you can see that, you can look down at the ground, you can look up at the trees, you can look over at me walking. You see, you know, Jonas is walking right there. It just looks way cooler, I think, when you have it on your phone. Now, that's still just looking at it kind of in the 360 degree video format. You can turn it into virtual reality if you put it into a viewer. Now remember, this is the very basic version of virtual reality. This is Google Cardboard. Now, right at this very moment, I have an iPhone. It doesn't actually work viewing my YouTube videos on you know, a device like this. It will in the future. The step up is watching it on Gear VR from Samsung. Obviously, you also will need a Samsung phone to go with that, but that's kind of your first intro. The next step above that is actually watching it on like an Oculus Rift or a Vive or something like that, which is coming soon. It's not even available right at the moment. And because the way of viewing these videos, both on YouTube and Facebook and with Google Cardboard and with the Oculus Rift and stuff, is changing all the time, really I think it's best to just let you know that you can view these things and share with you some of the better resources to do that. Now, I wrote an article, link in the description, which I'm linking to all of these things. Oh, wow, I feel like I went through that really fast. Thanks for watching this little 360 degree video tutorial. I hope you got something out of it. What I'm hoping is that if you're a small production company or you're a one-man band, I know a lot of you are, that the take home is that you can actually take this as a tool, put it into your toolkit and use it in future films. I mean, we're all about telling stories, right? And this is just a storytelling technique. What I love though is that virtual reality is just kind of a game changer. It can allow you to tell stories in such amazing ways because it immerses the audience in an environment that they've really never immersed themselves in quite in this way before. And obviously the things that are a little bit different is that it adds to the workflow just a little bit. It's a little bit of an expense, although this may be $3,500 all put together. You know, it's a little bit like a camera. Also, you have maybe a $750 editing program, but combined, if you wanted to pitch this to a client and or you just had some spare change and you wanted to start into it, pretty cool little thing. Also, remember, you can get one of those cheap cameras and do it without this huge setup. So it's just a few things to think about. I know there's a little bit of a void on the web right now as far as tutorials in this. I'll put links to my favorite ones, the ones that I've found so far, in the description below.